Hello and welcome to episode 265 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Dad FF. We are 5 official weeks into the season. For some of you guys, that means, it's time to start rebuilding. You're 1-4, you're 0-5. Snoog and I are going to run you through the, Smash Accept, the Dynasty Dad approved rebuild process. And we're going to give some insight into this 2025 class. We got 2 podcasts set up for you tonight, 2 live streams, putting all that content out there for you guys. Nobody better to do that with than my main man Snoog. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good, Dad. It feels good because I don't have any teams that I'm going to have to hit that rebuild button on, at least yet. Doing very well this year. I got multiple first place teams, most of them in the first or second or third place right now. So dominating in redraft and dynasty. So I'm excited for that, but I'm sure there'll be more injuries and I'll have a team that I need to rip down and put it through the dad rebuild process. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that in this 25 class that is loaded at running back coming up soon.
Yeah, if you ain't first, you're last. Right now I got 20 teams, 3 of them are rebuilds. Across those 3 rebuilds, I have 21, 25 firsts. And it just feels great. Actually, 26, because I'm loaded up on them. And everybody talks about, Dad, those are just picks. Like, what are you going to do with that? You're really going to take all those. If you did that in 2024, right? Everybody was talking about how 2024 was a horrible year for that. I mean, right now, if you're just looking at the 101 through 106, they skyrocketed. Right now, Jaden Daniels is the 101 overall, according to KTC. Crazy or not, he was the 104, 103, 104. He's worth the 101 startup. Neighbors is a first-round startup pick. He was going at the 103. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a second-round startup. He was the 102. You got Bowers, Caleb, and Brian Thomas Jr. All are literally inside the top 3 rounds. Like, all of those guys already panned out to what you wanted them to be. Rome Odunze, Drake May, they're going to get there. So this is 25 class has a boatload of these kind of talented players. It may not have the superstar quarterbacks at the top. We're going to go over all these guys when we talk about the 25 first, but don't just say, hey, man, I'm just trying to trade for picks. Because when you're doing this strategically, our rebuild process is literally to look at everything, give yourself the best opportunity to minimize risk and maximize return. And that's really what the whole process is all about. Love that we're doing this at nighttime rather than the daytime. We get questions. Colts and Cards said currently in first after 5 weeks, but have 2 early 25 firsts. Do I leverage those into trading for superstars or take a shot at Junty and Ollie? Snoog, I am not trading those right now because Ashton Junty, okay, and I keep seeing things. I've watched the tape, and I see a lot of people saying this is the best running back we've seen since Barry Sanders. This is Bijan plus. This is Breece Hall. This is another guy that, I know both of those guys are struggling, but they're saying this is the guy. I mean, what has he done over these first several weeks is enough to just blow the top off. He is my Superflex 101. I believe he's yours as well. What player would you be willing to trade for that pick? We're going to do an entire show on this. But if you're in this situation, Snoog, I'm holding those picks until it's absolute smash time.
He is arguably the best college football running back we've ever seen. I mean, he's set to break Barry Sanders' records. Pretty sure he has 16 touchdowns in 5 games, and in 2 of those games, he only played a half. He is literally as generational as they come, and I know that word gets thrown around a lot lately, but if you look at the tweet I just tweeted out about Ashton Junty and his production from a yards per team play perspective, from just a total PPR points perspective, and just an EPA per play, he is better than, I comped him to some of the best prospects we've had since 2015. Todd Gurley, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Nick Chubb, all those elite, Alvin Kamara, CMC. I comped them all analytically, and Ashton Junty blew every single one out of the water. It wasn't even close, especially for year 3.
1,000 yards already.
He is such an elite touchdowns. Receiver too, and they haven't even used him.
They haven't used him.
So he is like this. Literally, he was a wideout converted to running back, so he is like a superstar receiver as well.
I love that. And so that's what we're kind of going with there. You're going to hold these picks. I know you guys are going to ask a lot of questions throughout this one, but I'm going to try to hit a couple early. Jack Donahue, always commenting from YouTube. I love that. If you're a contender, are you okay with moving on from a late first at this point in the year? I usually wait till about week 8 to really, make that push. Because if you trade that for Derrick Henry right now, and then that pick becomes the 107, then you missed out on Brian Thomas Jr. this year. You know what I mean? In next year's class, we're going to talk about it. Right now, Snoog, I have it at about 7 deep again, maybe 7, maybe 8. Not the elite level quarterbacks. I only have one really up there, but I think if you trade it now, you might regret it. So obviously pair some seconds, play around with that. That's the way I try to look at those things. A couple other ones. You guys love this rebuild stuff. We got our main man, Benito Boyer, rebuilding in my 1 QB with 5 firsts. Mine's the 101. This is the year, Snoog. If you are rebuilding in a 1 quarterback league, you are going to go from worst to first by next year. Smash. You're going to get Junty. You're going to get Judkins. You're going to get McMillan. You're going to be loaded up. And if you already have that quarterback, I'm telling everybody in those 1 quarterback leagues, in a super flex, I always tell everyone, hey, you know what? Make those wide receivers elite. In a 1 quarterback, make sure you have a young elite quarterback set in place. Make sure you have an elite tight end in place, and you're going to just dominate because you're going to get elite level players right here and there. So love those questions. I want to jump into what we're trying to talk about, and you guys can do that throughout this entire thing. But Snoog, step 1, and this is a process now that it's hard to believe, Snoog, but it's going on 4 years old. You know, this is three plus years of the process that I came up with on how to rebuild. And the first one has always been one that people really struggle with. You and I are really good at this. We do it in the Discord with guys all the time. Honestly, assess your roster. So you're 5 weeks in. There was a guy messaging me in the Discord today, said, Dad, I'm 1-4. What do I do with this team? And I look at the team, and it's AJ Brown. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's loaded the whole way across. And I said, you know what? This team is not done. This is a team that I think right now you could rattle off 3 or 4 more wins and put yourself into a playoff picture very easily because you had injuries that kind of made this team look the way it is. And I think a lot of teams just say, well, assess your roster. You mean your wins and losses. And that's not the only part of it, right? I've seen rosters that people have sent to me that they're 3-2. And I'm like, how in the hell did you even win a game? But you're 3-2, because there's some of those kind of rosters out there. So talk to me about how you honestly assess a roster, because this is one people send me hundreds of these a month. And I'm like, all right, this is how I'm going to look at it. But how would you go about stepping into this after 5 weeks?
Step 1 is, am I a pretender or am I a contender? The way I look at that is, for example, my most competitive Dynasty Football League, Fantasy Football League right now, my $200 league, it's got a ton of sharp people in there. Dynasty Zoltan's in there. And the list goes on of just some of these Popes. Jeremy Popes from Twitter, another big guy, is in there. It's just loaded with a bunch of guys that know what they're doing. There's like 3 or 4 8-0 teams that are absolutely, because we play the league median, 2 of those 8-0 teams are like, how is this team even winning? Like, it is ridiculous. It has like the craziest batch of people, like Wandale Robinson, like all these like random little rebuild gadget guys that are just blowing up. Pretender. Contenders, teams that own Jamar Chase, teams that own Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. You could see the substance in the team, and it's like, that team's a playoff team. There's the pretenders that have the hot starts or the hot middle of the years or the hot finishes, and there's the contenders that are good year round, and then there's the teams that start off slow. You have AJ Brown, you have Joe Mixon, you got some of these injured guys.
Puka Nacua, you get some of those injuries.
Cooper Kupp, and then you blow up towards the end of the season because your team's actually good. So I like to look at the roster. Do I have depth? Do I have good running backs? Do I have wideouts that aren't just having spike weeks like Rashid Shaheed? Or do I actually have a Tyreek Hill who has no quarterback right now, but in week 8 he will? So you got to look at it like that too. And you have to be able to understand, am I a pretender or am I a contender? Because that is going to be the death of you. You start out 8-0 and then you end up going 8-18 or 10-14 or some crazy thing like that. I've seen it happen plenty of times.
And this is the time where, if you guys right now, the Patreon is just $5 a month. In the Discord, people send me them daily. Say, Dad, what do you think of this roster? Here's my record. Here's my team. Here's my picks. Boom. This is what it is. The process that we have is top 3 or bottom 3. There's no middle ground. You're either rebuilding, you're all in contending, or you're retooling for next year. You know what I mean? Like that middle section, you don't ever want to be 5 through 9, ever. You should not want to be in that spot because you're probably limping into the playoffs or you're just trying to get in on that last spot. So the 3 things that I consider when I'm looking at honestly assessing my roster, number 1, core player ages. And when I say core player, I don't care if you have Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry at running back. I'm talking about your quarterbacks. You know, as your quarterbacks, are you running out there with Baker Mayfield and Aaron Rodgers? Or are you running out there with Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray? You know, and do you have a good third backup? For me, the most important is my wide receivers. I got to have at least 2 foundational wide receivers. If you guys don't know what that is, we've done multiple podcasts on those, you know, and that number keeps adding because I put Brian Thomas Jr. in there now. And then I look at, you know, my tight end. Do I have a Brock Bowers? Do I have a Trey McBride? Do I have one of those other guys to absolutely come in there and smash? Number 2, I look at future draft capital. Snoog, in the beginning when I first started Dynasty, I was like, the hell with these picks, right? I'm just done with them. Yeah, I don't need picks. Now it's like, look what you can do with these picks, honestly. If you don't have future assets, and some of my best teams, Smash 12, if I ran you through my roster, right now I have 11 guys going in the top 3 rounds, but I got 425 first. It's ready, right? It's all the way in. And then I'm going, I was like, I got these first just in case something happens. That's why I always talk about insulating trades because some people will send me, Dad, I'm a smash contender right now, man. Look at this. And then I go down and look and I see starting roster's beautiful. Bench has like 2 guys on it. And then the picks, nothing in 25, nothing in 26, nothing in 27. And you're like, you better be a contender. You better win this whole thing or you're done. You know, so I want to make sure I have future draft capital. And number 3, I know I start to look at the max points for. You know, I start to look at how many points, like sometimes you have bad luck, right? You could be 3-2 and be number 1 in the league in points or number 2 in the league in points. Right now, you and I are in Smash 9. I'm number 1 in the league in points by almost 100, and I'm 3-2. I'm not going to start packing it in. Like my team is ready, and I'm taking you down, Snoop. I know I beat you in week 2. I'm coming at you, man. That league there, we got to look up who won that league last year, but you and I are hungry to try to go after that one. And then I look at my elite level assets. Like if I have a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Patrick Mahomes, a Jaden Daniels, if I lose something, I can tear down. But if my quarterback's Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff, you have no ability to tear down. So anything to add to that? I mean, I love, you know, when it comes to the rebuild shows, I love talking about that. Honestly, assessing your roster is just something that's so important. So few people do it properly because they just say, I'm 4-1. What are you talking about? Assess my team. I'm 1-4. Yeah, I got to pack it in.
Yeah, there's scenarios where I started off like 3-2 or 4-1, especially in that 2023 class with Bijan and Stroud and those guys. I remember I had a team that was one of those like, I'm going to go for it, and if it doesn't work out, rip it down. And week 3 or 4, team started off 3-1, and it just didn't feel right. Like, I knew this team was just such a pretender. It had so many shaky guys on there that were just, I honestly loaded up on draft capital and tried to contend after the startup. So it didn't work out, and I ended up just ripping it down, tanked, didn't win a single game the rest of the season, and got Bijan at 101. So don't be scared either to do that, especially because I noticed, I looked at the league, and I noticed that there was nobody really going hard rebuild yet. So people were kind of like in between, and a lot of people get caught in between. They don't care or pay attention enough to not get caught in that 104 to 107 range.
Yeah.
You want 101, 102 at worst, or you want 112. Like, there's nothing else to that.
And that's the way to do it. I'm glad you brought up 101. And a lot of teams are starting to, like, especially in the Smash Leagues, there'll be like 3 guys trying to rebuild at the same time. And they're like, that gets tough, right? But having that 101, traditionally speaking, and this is something that Zoltan and I both looked up, it's 30% or more valuable than the 102. You know, and everybody's like, well, Dad, but that doesn't mean you. I mean, Caleb was your 101. He's not worth 30% more than Marv or Neighbors or Daniels, but he was at one point when we got into this whole process, you know. And in 2024, Caleb Williams helped expedite a bunch of my rebuilds. I mean, I traded the 101 for the 103, the 108, and the 25 first. Got Neighbors at 103. I got Thomas at 108, and I got a first on top of that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the rookie fever of having the 101. And that was a trade, Snoog, that when we did this in May, that Caleb Williams was I can't miss, right? So it's not always just getting the 101 and drafting that player. It's being able to trade those players. It's being able to, I mean, right now, that team there, I might not have a quarterback, but I got neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. and another first. I'm going to be able to load up on those kind of things. So you're able to do with that 101 is you're able to tear that down into multiple assets within the same draft, within next year's class. 26 is going to have a lot of wide receivers, a little bit more in the quarterback class, but it's like you're going to be able to have that 25 101. And Snoog, everybody was mocking me where they're like, originally it was Shed for Shador. Now it's, Cash for Ash. I saw somebody put that on Twitter today. Ashton Junty is going to get you a haul. Bijan Robinson was getting you a haul. In that class, when Bijan was the 101, you could have traded for the 105, the 110, and a future first and got Laporta, Stroud, and a first. And that's really what the power of that 101 is. It's not the 101 only. And dude, there's my boy. He's the one, Scarface, in every dang league. I'm trying to get the 101. He's trying to out rebuild me. So he's trying to out dad the dad. But Scarface, I beat you in Smash Except 6, and you had to use the dad gifts all week. But no, this is what's super cool about it is when you get that 101 Snoog, it is a king's ransom. I almost feel bad when I pick the 101 because I'm like, man, I could have sold that for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and even in what was considered a weaker class with no QBs, Breece Hall was worth a ton too. He was one of the cheaper 101s, but he was still worth a good amount. Like he was the locked and loaded 101 for everybody. And then Bijan, and then you look at Caleb Williams last year or Marv, whoever ended up going in your league. And then if you even go back more, you go back to 2021. It was Trevor Lawrence. It's not looking good now, but
but you got a haul for Trevor Lawrence.
You got a haul for him. He was a first round starter pick before he even played a snap. Look at Joe Burrow too, or Jonathan Taylor. So it doesn't matter who it is, you're going to get a haul. You don't have to keep them. If you don't want to risk them busting, or if you need other assets, you have the option. So
absolutely. Question here from Hendricks. He said he got rid of Tank Tua. That's not Hawk Tua. We're talking Tank Tua. Rashad White ended up with 2 firsts at 26. I mean, that's a smash. You get rid of those kind of guys. Right now, I mean, I love that. Moving Rashad White just feels so good off your teams right now. I love that. Step 3. And this is the one nobody has used. This is something that I coined several years ago, is making that splash trade. So Snoog, you talked about it. You already said guys are sitting there in the middle, right? And they're trying to, it's almost like I forget how Zoltan puts it, but he's like a treadmill of mediocrity, right? We're just staying in that same middle all the time. And those are the guys that are like, I'll give you my first for Joe Mixon, and then they don't win. And then they just stay there perpetually in that same area. That's what you don't want to do. You want to get yourself into that area. And the splash trade is to get you off that fence. This is one where I look at, in Smash Except 6. And this is a trade. I know the timing matters. Timing's everything in Dynasty, but I traded ETN, Goff, Keenan Allen for Pittman, Wan'Dale Robinson, and 2 firsts. Right now, the 1 first is the 106. The other is the 108. I flipped Pittman after that, but it's a matter of like, during that time, I was looking at it. I was like, oh man, I got Goff, I got ETN, I got Keenan. I could probably just make it by, and I could sit in that middle. Instead, Wan'Dale Robinson panned out. The firsts obviously are insulated, and they have that value to keep going. This was a trade I actually made in January, but then it's a matter of like, now I'm as liquid as possible. I'm mitigating as much risk as possible. I'm maximizing my return, and I'm literally going all in. I've done this in the past where I've traded, before Jalen Hurts' breakout, I traded Kyler Murray and Chris Godwin, and I believe I got Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. You know what I mean? It's like you make these moves, and you the guys you believe in, and it's a matter of just trying to assess that next guy. Who's that next big guy? And when you make those splash trades, they sting. They're supposed to. It's the trade that Snoog, I'll message you and I'll be like, am I crazy here? Because you're speculating a lot. But let's say you did this in 2024 and you walked away with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey. You ended up pulling 4 firsts from guys. There's no one worth those 4 guys right now. Like, even if you traded Josh Allen, those 4 firsts are worth more than Josh Allen, and I think the 25 class is going to be that way. We talked about Junty. Who are some other guys at the top, not going into major detail, but who are those guys where you're like, what's the 102? Right now, for me, the 102 is still Ted McMillan, but I think Shedeur Sanders is in that same area as 103. So talk to me a little bit about those 102, 103, and what those guys are worth.
Yeah, Ted McMillan is another guy that I did some analytical research on, just production-based yards per team pass attempt, EPA per play, just some of the basic metrics that we look forward to that can predict success, yards per out run numbers. I comped him. I actually compared him to the best of the best. I compared him to Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, all the way back to 2019 with DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and those guys. He was up there with the best of the best again. So this is another guy in this class, production-wise, dominant. It's a little weird when you see Boise State and Arizona as the two colleges at the top of the rookie draft, but I don't think that really matters anymore. I think we're well past college and helmet scouting where that matters. Ashton Junty is just generational, but Ted McMillan is he's going to be on the brim of an elite prospect, probably a top 10 to 15 NFL draft pick. And then if you look at Shedeur Sanders, as of right now, he's my QB1 in the class. He is a facilitator. He sees the field well. He's a field general. He can make all the throws. He's got the touch that you want, that NFL touch. He reminds me of like a Walmart CJ Stroud, like very similar type of player. Sniper in the pocket, good player, makes smart decisions, doesn't turn the ball over, can make all the throws, arm talent, got the arm strength. He can make plays. He can extend them with his legs a little bit. His O-line is literally like my high school football team offensive line right now, and he's out there. Bad. Last year, especially delivering against USC, delivering against UCLA, delivering against all these big Power 5 schools that should absolutely steamroll Colorado. But they either won, they beat TCU, like they won, and they were in those big games against Caleb Williams, against these good schools, because of Shedeur Sanders, because of Travis Hunter, not anybody else. So that's like one thing that can help you identify how good a prospect is what did they do when there was nothing on the table for them and when they had nothing there on their back, and they always performed. So that's why I'm really excited. Travis Hunter's probably going to be a cornerback, I think, but if he does play wide out or some type of wide receiver position on offense, he's probably going to be up there at the top of the.
He'll be a first rounder. I was going to say, like, I have Burden over him still, and Judkins, but you have to consider him in that 5-6 range.
Judkins is my RB2. He's probably the 104 for me right now.
Yep, I love that. Yep. And the interesting thing is, this year's class, you're not going to be able to get a lot of superstar quarterbacks. Sanders is going to be that top guy. I'm with you. He's been my guy from the beginning as well, and I think that changes things. So now I'm trying to tier up to get two quarterbacks to make sure I'm into position. Couple questions, and every year this is our most popular episode. You guys are coming out in droves, but real quick, let's hammer some of these. If you're in a hard rebuild, would you try to tear down from CeeDee Lamb to a solid wide receiver? And the answer is yes. But the difference that people don't really understand sometimes, and Andrew, I'm glad you asked this, is a hard rebuild. You're just starting out, sure. Like if you're going to go, if you can give me CeeDee Lamb for Brian Thomas Jr., a first, and maybe a 26 first, a 25 and a 26 first, or you can get yourself, you tear down to Nico Collins in a second. Yeah. You go to Drake London in a first. Right now, this guy Puka in a first, and make sure that first is mid. That's the difference between the beginning where it's a hard rebuild into, if this, sometimes people just want to keep trading for picks, and that's not what we're talking about. If you are decent next year and you're like, I need a foundational wide receiver, I trust CD over Puka in a late first. But if I'm just starting the process, you take the swing last year, right? And you trade CD for Puka in a first, and you take Brian Thomas Jr., you win. You know what I mean? Like that's the way it rolls. Another one here from.
One thing I want to highlight on that real quick before we jump, just for everybody listening, one thing I want to really talk about is make sure when you're making a move like that, you're not getting a guy that is stuck at that range that he's going at. Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, those fringe top 12 wide receivers that are valued like that, but will never be that top 12 wide receiver. Like Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, great players, great wide receivers. I like owning them in Dynasty. They're never going to be top. They don't even have a chance to be a top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. Like Malik Neighbors had a chance. Like Garrett Wilson had a chance. know the talent, know the it factor in the player, and know that they have a chance to make that jump. Garrett made that jump. I know it's been a little weird now with him, but like
Mm-hmm.
Neighbors is already up there, right? He's already in that top 3,
What?
top 4.
And the
You have
weird
to
thing
know
is
that.
you've missed now, because if you did these trades before your rookie draft, going after Neighbors, going after Brown, or going after Neighbors, going
You would have
after
got a haul on
Harrison,
top,
going
2
after
firsts.
Thomas, you're fine, right? And those are your areas there. And then now you're at a spot where it's like you could have done that for Nico, now you can't. You could have done that for Garrett, now you can't. You look at it, you're right. Maybe it's the only guy I see outside the top 12 right now who I'm really aggressively going after, and the only reason he's not there is because of injury, is Rashee Rice. Maybe Jaden Reed. Brian Thomas Jr. is inside the top 12 now, but Roma Dunze, I think, has some ability to go up in value. But most of these guys, they're going to stay where they're at. DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle. They're not going to go too much higher than where you are. So that's a great point. I love that. Back to the question there from the Roll 07. Pick a side, Dynasty 2 quarterback, Caleb Dobbins Pollard or Marv K9 and Levis. I'm leaning towards, man, Snoog. That one's tough because I love Marv. I love K9. I don't want to play Levis at all. And then I love Caleb. I'm going to lean the Marv side because I think I can pick up a quarterback cheap and try to roll them in there. But that kind of gets to be a difficult type question. We've got another one here. My main guy here, he said he just underline. Flip Breeze for 4 firsts. Woo! That's there's nobody worth 4 firsts anymore. I have my number 1 quarterback is worth 3.5. That's definitely the way to do it. Brandon, man, these are so many questions. I can't even get to them all. Braden Schuster said, and you see he's got the is that Junty right there on his logo, or is that him playing quarterback? No, I offered Anthony Richardson and Mark Andrews for Kenneth Walker, Tutu, and Malik. Go get Malik Neighbors everywhere you can if you still can. Next part, and this is where it's real fun, right? So now we got our first. You got to make sure if you're starting a rebuild, Snoog, that you have your first, and that's why we talked about that step 2 was getting your first, because that 101 is everything. You want to control your destiny, because if you don't, you might as well just try to get younger. You're not trying to worry about picks. You're not trying to shave off points. You're just trying to trade T. Higgins for a younger version. You're just trying to get that younger guy. You're trying to get some other picks on top. Where you have that 101, then you're like, okay, I got to start shaving some of this roster off. So if your league does award the 101 to the lowest max points for, which it should, it absolutely should, you want to put yourself in a scenario where you are going to be able to get the 101 because you're going to shave off points. Snoog, some people tell me like they think the most purest way to get the 101 is the toilet bowl. I think that is a completely antiquated list, a way to try to do it. Do you play in any leagues that are still that way, or are you all in when you talk about max points for?
Yeah, it's all max points for. I don't do anything with record, nothing with toilet bowl. I do max points for people that don't set lineups if they forget. It takes just the overall worst team, just a cumulative, which I like, and it's just the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, and it's sleeper. You can't even cheat by putting guys on your taxi squad so that they hold that against you. You know what I mean? So the 2025 class, the strength of this class, Snoog, and you and I have talked about it. It's the running backs. So I'm going to talk to you about my one rebuild right now. I have Caleb Williams right now, and then I have like 5 different other quarterback 2s, which we'll start to move. Running back position, I have Kendra Miller and Audric Estime. So that's it. I have a running back void, which we're going to talk about. Wide receivers, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. That's what Garrett Wilson. You're trying to load up your wide receivers. So you have a team where you're just like, next year, I am just going to put in Ashton Junty, Quinshon Judkins, Ollie Gordon. You're done. That's what I did in 2023, where it was like, okay, I'm going to add Bijan, Gibbs, A-Chain, forget it. Automatic worst to first in all 3 of my rebuilds that year. And I think this is another year, Snoog, where these running backs are going to be so good and so dominant with the way the landscape's set up. You're going to dominate for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at Ashton Junty, there's Quinshon Judkins. There's Amarian Hampton from UNC, who's been an absolute monster this year. He has like 780 rushing yards in 5 games. Ollie Gordon, a guy that had a ton of hype. He's been very underperforming this year. I don't know if it's... I haven't looked. I'm going to dive deep into that, figure out why he's been stinking this year, but I think it's just he's the whole offense and they're shutting him down. You got
Nick
Singleton, elite athlete, young player. The best thing about all these guys is they're all early declares, 20, 21 years old.
That's
they're
huge.
Perfect prospects. They're all... I think there's about... I'll rattle off guys who would have been RB1 in this class, in my opinion, if they had declared. Junty, Judkins, Gordon, Travion Henderson, Omarion Hampton, Nicholas Singleton, Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I think you could argue Devin Neal over Jonathan Brooks as well. And then Damian Martinez is a guy you can throw in there. Not as the RB1 in this class, but he would have been a guy that probably went day 2 in this 2024 class. So you're looking at a landscape like what 2020 should have been, right? When we had Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, 2 guys, elite prospects, down to the injury, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's going to be a class that has a ton of hype like that. A lot of round 2 picks, a lot of round 3 picks, probably a first rounder or 2. I think Judkins is good enough to be a first rounder. Like, he has all the talent. He should be a first rounder. If you just look at his production, I mean, elite breakout season, 1,500 yards as a true freshman on Ole Miss. That's a team that plays great competition in the SEC. Next year, another 1,200-plus yard season, and he's catching the ball out of the backfield. And this year, he's pacing another 1,000-yard-plus season in a committee with another day 2 caliber talented back in Travion Henderson, who everybody had as the RB1 in 2024 if he had declared. So that just proves how good Judkins is. So the way to do it is like you're doing it, Dad. Get your quarterbacks, get your wideouts, and then get ready, and then fire it up for those quarterbacks, because they're going to be plug and plays from day 1.
And that's the biggest thing, is you should get those guys, you plug them in. And I keep telling everybody, you know what? Take Ladd McConkey and try to work your way from him, because Ladd McConkey is not a foundational wide receiver. Ladd McConkey never will be a foundational wide receiver. But try to add and try to get yourself into a situation where you can move up and you can get yourself. And that's step 5. We talk about trying to create that running back void, trying to liquidate our assets the best we can, and trying to make sure we can load up. And when I say liquidate, Snoog, I mean get as many rookie picks as possible. Because what's the only player in the entire NFL, the only asset you can have that is not going to depreciate?
Quarterbacks, picks.
It's right, exactly. It's the quarterbacks and it's the rookie picks. So I love that. Hey, a couple quick questions I have to read here that I absolutely you love here. Xavier Lopez, we are now on we got the super comments set up, so you guys can obviously ask questions, those kind of things. He said, speaking of rebuilds, he's in a 16-team super flex start 11 2.0 tight end premium. So that's a baller league right there. He said, give Laporta and get Rashee Rice a first, even though it's a late one. He's in a hard rebuild, and he already has 325 firsts with the quarterbacks locked, so he knows what he's doing with Love and Hurts. Snoog, for me, this is a smash accept, man. Like, if I can give Laporta and Deontay Johnson and get Rashee Rice in a first, I'm doing it. Now, I understand that the situation there with the 2.0 tight end premium is pretty huge, but he has Njoku as well on his team. So what are you thinking? In a rebuild, hard rebuild, Rashee Rice in the first or Laporta and Deontay Johnson?
I'm taking Rashee Rice in the first, and I'm not thinking twice about it.
Rashee Rice is the perfect, and I love that, Xavier Lopez. Thank you so much. He's the perfect quintessential guy that you can put in to your rebuild. Getting Rashee Rice ensures that you're not going to get any points, and your team's only going to get better. I love that. Thank you so much for jumping that in there, Xavier. Snoog, I mean, that's a very big thing. Is Rashee Rice right now is just the ultimate buy when you're talking about a rebuild. Right now, I think you can give up CeeDee Lamb and get 2 firsts on top of Rashee Rice. If you have a team that really wants to go out there and compete, you can get those other things where you could just go and you could give up Nico Collins and get Rashee Rice in a first. You can give up Brian Thomas Jr. and probably get a second and get Rashee Rice in a first. We've seen it. I don't think Kansas City's going to go out there and draft another elite level wide receiver. He's going to be the guy next year. Don't even worry about it. Now it's an LCL instead of the ACL, which is kind of huge. We're talking about he's got a 6-week process where he's going to, post-surgery, he does have 4 months where he can't work out. So that part's going to be a little bit more difficult for the road, but it's much better than the 9 months on the ACL. A lot of people are really down on that, but Sam Brody wants to know, Snoog, if you're doing a rebuild, who would you rather put in your roster? You want Keon Coleman or Josh Downs?
I'm not a big Keon Coleman fan at all, but I would take him just for the point of if he has like 2 blow-up games, his value is going to skyrocket.
So much more.
Josh Downs, so you can flip him.
If Josh Downs was in the Rashee Rice role, he would freaking dominate. Joe Flacco is making him look like a beast. Anthony Richardson, not so much. So when we're talking about that step 5 and our insulated trades, this is what we're talking about, okay? We want to take our trades. We want to, mitigate risk. Market depreciation happens on all players. So we want to make sure we're picking guys that move up. So in 2 trades that I made that were in this past offseason, I traded, or two off seasons ago, I traded a random first. Hold on. I gave up Tyreek Hill. Okay. And I got Devonta Smith and a random first. Okay. Right now, Devonta's worth more than Tyreek Hill or in that same area. That pick became the 107. I drafted Rome Odunze. Would you rather have Devonta Smith and Rome Odunze or Tyreek Hill? And at the time, Snoog, that guy thought he was getting a smash contender. He's ready to go. Another one I traded Tyreek Hill for Christian Watson. I know Christian Watson's not anything. And a random first. That random first became the 103. I got Malik Neighbors and Christian Watson for Tyreek Hill. That's why we have really coined the insulated trades. It's why when you make a random first trade, right, you always want to take that guy. You want to take someone that's up towards the top. And I'm even willing to trade CeeDee Lamb. I'm willing to trade Nico Collins. I'm willing to trade those guys in a rebuild because if you can get a random first, everybody thinks it's random right now. And Snoop, I know you and I have vultured this over the years where you look at that guy that's 3-2 and he's like, you know what? I'm looking pretty good. But then you look at his max points for and he's almost last. And then you look at his, who he's playing against and he's got the softest schedule. You make a trade with that guy because that's what I did here is I traded Tyreek Hill and he's like, oh, I'm going to kill it, man. I get Tyreek Hill, so I'm going to win it. He ends up tanking the rest of the year. I get the 103. Malik Neighbors is already worth at least 1 first, if not more. And then Christian Watson's thrown in. And this is the type of trade that you have to do to win your rebuilds. It expedites it so quickly.
I'm thinking about buying. Sorry, I muted because I keep coughing. I'm thinking about buying Rashee Rice right now on all dynasty rebuilds. If I have one, I said I didn't have one yet, but if I do get one, I'm gonna be buying because now you gotta assume now people are panicking because of the injury. Now he's
100%.
Chance he misses almost 2 years with the suspension and the injury. This is the way to do it, and especially like last year, Dad, we were buying Kyler like crazy at his cost. He's a first round starter pick this year. Joe Burrow, guy we were buying all offseason when he was injured. He's another first-round starter pick this year. Again,
Yeah.
He's playing lights out. These are the things you got to do. You got to stay on top of the injuries and buy the elite talents when they get injured. That's the best way to get value. That's the best way to turn a team around. Take chances because more likely than not, if you're buying elite players and talented guys that are hurt, it's going to pay off for you.
And we're trying to take guys that we believe are going to take that next step. That's why we were drafting players that we were trading for Rashee Rice. We were trading for Jaden Reed. We were trading for a lot of these guys, even George Pickens, who hasn't quite panned out. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm kind of skipping over my tier 7 where I have really, solid wide receivers. And I'm going down and I'm taking deep stabs on some of these other guys. I'm taking, I was getting, there were opportunities where I was getting Wicks in a first for, Mike Evans, where you just get Wicks thrown in. There, Adonai Mitchell's a guy to get thrown in. Xavier Legette, Jordan Addison. It doesn't have to be high profile. You can go and trade this time of year. Mike Evans is hot, right? And you're trying to get him off your team. You could give up Mike Evans and get a first and get them to throw in, even though it doesn't sound crazy, you get him to throw in Jalen Polk. You get him to throw in Ricky Purcell. You get him to throw in Jalen McMillan. You get him to throw in one of these other guys. Mike Evans is barely worth a first. So these throw-in guys, these guys that you get added, a Michael Wilson, Adonai Mitchell, those are the guys that just becomes that icing on the cake. In these particular trades that I was talking about, they added the value to it. And then we create that running back void. So we talk about it. We talk a lot about reduced volatility trades, Snoog. This is where you take Breece Hall, right? And you have your primary assets. And so many guys send me their rebuild assets, and their number 1 and 2 players are Bijan and Breece, or Bijan and Gibbs. And the problem with that is you are looking at the rebuild process is a 2-year process. 2 years from now, Breece, Bijan, and Gibbs could depreciate a little bit, right? But what are the percentages that Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, what are the percentages that those guys depreciate in value? It's next to nothing. You know what I mean?
They tore their ACLs.
Exactly. Nothing. So the longevity of that position is so much longer. So what I'm always advocating is, you know what? Trade Bijan and Mike Evans for Justin Jefferson and a toss-in running back. So now all of a sudden you have that core piece to build around, and now Neighbors is in that area. You know, if I'm rebuilding, I want Neighbors over any running back. I want Marv over any running back. You know, like that's where you got to look at things. You got to get yourself set up. Whether we draft the running backs next year, right now we're just trying to tier up those wide receivers. And the fun part, Snoog, is I want to get your take on how you look at it from a contender, because as a rebuilder, I got those 3 rebuilding teams every week. I got Kareem Hunt in the third for a second. Whoever wants it, bring it in. Give me a second, right? And then I got Cam Akers. Cam Akers in a third for any second. Nobody wants that. 2/3 get Cam Akers, because Cam Akers is going to do me no good in 2 years, right? But those little wins after wins after wins after wins, and you get into a rookie draft like I had in Smash Accept 12, where I had the entire third round. So I took Bucky Irving. I took Braylon Allen. I took Tyrone Tracy. And guess what? I'm getting seconds for all those guys now. You know what I mean? So it's like these little wins start to steamroll. And I that's how I look at it, is every single time a guy plays off. I mean, I just sold, and this isn't sexy at all, but I took Slayton in a fourth and got a third today. It's not sexy, but is Slayton ever going to play for my team? No, absolutely not. So it's like you make these little moves and you try to just tier up and make those picks better. Yeah. Now, what are you doing from a contender?
Yeah, from a contender standpoint, I'm actually going out right now and buying the Kareem Hunts. I'm buying the Tyler Lockett's, the Darnell Mooney's, these guys that are...
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney's gained a lot of value, but he was a guy I grabbed a couple of shares of before the season started. But Kareem Hunts, Ty Chandler's, these type of guys, I want like 4 running backs that I could... This is the year to own running backs right now. Like the league's running backs are coming back. They're scoring a ton of points right now. The way I've been running a lot of my really successful teams is 4 running backs, 2 flexes, and 2 at the RB position. Mm-hmm. And then what I've been doing is I've been having a Rico Dowdle, a Kareem Hunt, a Ty Chandler, those type of guys on my bench with like a Nick Chubb, just so I know that I have some firepower at running back at depth. And then my wideouts, I'm really focusing on keeping them young but elite. Malik Neighbors, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, guys along those lines. Having in some Mike Evans and some Stephon Diggs sprinkled in there. I have so much Stephon Diggs. I was buying him at an extreme rate this offseason. It's been panning off for me in a lot of my contending leagues, but I've been really loving the idea of pairing I've been buying so much Kenneth Walker and Jahmyr Gibbs. Like they're closing in on, outside of Kamara, they're probably right there with my most owned dynasty running backs, and I have like 75% of Alvin Kamara, but I've been throwing those two in a lot of these lineups with like a Derrick Henry and an Alvin Kamara or a Jordan Mason, and just having like those veteran stud anchor RB1s. Saquon Barkley's another name, and then having my 2 young cornerstone running backs to build around, because Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, these guys, they're probably going to be good. Like, look at Kamara, look at Mixon, look at all, they're 27, 28, 29 years old, still elite. I'm done fading running back because they're 25 or they're 26. Yeah. The best of the best running backs will be good for a while, unless some type of weird injury happens, like Todd Gurley with the knee arthritis, or Dalvin Cook tearing an ACL and wrecking his hamstring. Like, that's the stuff that happens, and then it's like, okay, you move past them. But Breece Hall, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, don't be scared to buy into those guys because they're 23 or 24 already. Aim for that 28-year-old, 29-year-old shelf life, because it's happening more and more with how medicine's been evolving for the players and for the position.
Another great question here. How do you evaluate players in terms of value pick or draft picks? I love this question, Snoog, and do you know why? Because this is what I have in the Discord. Is my rankings are set up this way where you can pull them up and you'll go to the wide receivers, right? And you see that Jamar Chase, Neighbors, Harrison, Amon-Ra, they're worth 2 firsts. And then you go down Nico, Brown, Wilson, Puka, they're worth the 102 to the 103. And I have every single tier valued where it says this next tier is from 105 to 106, the next one 107 to 110. So you guys can look at, okay, and that's for 25 values. You can say, you know what? This is what my player's worth. I can go out and make this trade, or this is what my player's worth. I'm going to go trade this guy. And that's something where Snoog, It takes us to step 6. Obviously, the part where you and I absolutely, I dominate the trades. I come out and do my best on the rookie drafts, but this is something where you and I have collaborated. Where if you look at right now, the top 12 picks from you and I, from what we had from our last mock draft, they are literally, aside from JJ McCarthy, who's moved down from 8 to 11 because he got injured. We nailed the first round. They're all absolutely valued in the same area where they need to be. I was big on Daniels. You were big on Neighbors. And this is that part where if you're in, and right now we're in that point scoring season, so everybody's talking redraft style. But when you get in that Dynasty Smash Accept Discord, when you're talking about rookie season, this is where you and I dominate. This is where you make your money because we told you to take Brian Thomas Jr. instead of people that were really trying to push Jonathan Brooks, people that were trying to tell you to take Bo Nix, people that were trying to tell you to trade into that area. You know what I mean? We were telling you to take Daniels and Neighbors when so many other people were saying it was Roma Dunze. There's so many ways where you guys were listening to us. You guys were following in that chat, in that group, and on here. We set you up for success.
Yeah, exactly. And rookie draft is honestly where you set your team up. Like that is the bread and butter. That's where you build your roster out, whether you're trading or whether you're making selections. I have a tendency for always trading my rookie picks when I'm on the clock for established assets because my mentality the past year and a half, 2 years in Dynasty has been let's win as much money as we can while also staying young, but being a top contender. So I'm taking those picks when it's time to make the draft pick. That's when the pick's the most valuable. When we know what the pick is and when we are on the clock, that is when you want to trade your pick because that is when you can get an established player and you don't even have to risk picking a JJ McCarthy or picking like a Jonathan Brooks or one of those guys over a Brian Thomas Jr., right? Or over a Roma Dunze or over a Brock Bowers. Turn that pick into AJ Brown or Nico Collins or Devontae Smith or one of these guys that you know is at least going to be that or better than that. So that's one thing that I've done that is a strategy that works for me for a while now is just trading that pick, especially those early seconds and those mid seconds. You can get your Alvin Kamara's, your Derrick Henry's, your Joe Mixon's during the offseason. Like I did that in plenty of leagues last year, mid to late seconds for Kamara, for James Conner, and now they're worth first. And that's just the reoccurring wheel. Stay ahead of the curve and pay attention to the seasons because Dynasty is seasonal. During the offseason, people don't want anything to do with vets. That's when you buy. During the season, that's when you sell vets or that's when you buy young players. So you just got to stay tuned with that as well.
That's why we try to stay a step ahead of the curve. I love that. This is a fun episode. It always is. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process. Oh, they select